Antarctica and the Southern Ocean have been the fascination of explorers, scientists, and pretty much everyone since their discovery. So what cryptids do these far-off lands hold? From lost walruses to mysterious whales to a creature that looks like Godzilla, some pretty bizarre cryptids allegedly live in the southernmost region of Earth. But first, this video is sponsored by Manta Sleep. Are you tired of cryptid hunters shining flashlights through your windows at night? With the Manta Sleep Mask, you'll no longer have to worry. It not only blocks out light so you can sleep better at night, but it's also really comfortable and can be adjusted to fit your needs. I've been using the mask myself and have fallen asleep way easier when I'm wearing it. The Manta Sleep Shop also features a variety of products, so if noise is keeping you awake at night, or you're traveling, they've also got you covered. You can click the link in the description and use the code CRYPTID to get 10% off your purchase. In 1962, a Soviet ship named the Sovetskaya Rossiya was near a research base when it encountered a pair of giant serpents. Two helicopter pilots initially spotted the animals, which they described as sea snake-like. The snakes were about 49 feet or 14 meters long and 3 feet or 90 centimeters wide. They stayed mostly still on the surface, but when they did move, it was in a convulsive manner. Ships in the area were warned about the creatures, as it was thought they could disrupt shipping. This wasn't the only sighting either, as one report claimed a group of up to 30 serpents was sighted. Dale Drinan theorized that these animals were living mosasaurs, a species of large aquatic reptile that went extinct around 66 million years ago. Similar giant marine reptiles had also been seen near New Zealand. But scientist B.A. Zenkovich had a different theory. He believed that, if it wasn't an unknown animal, the pilots could have just seen large clumps of seaweed that sometimes float to the surface. He also suggested they could have seen some tentacles from a giant squid that drifted out of its normal range. Narwhals are an exclusively northern hemisphere animal, but there have also been a couple of sightings of them in the far south. In 1615, a Dutch explorer named William Schouten was on a trip in the Southern Ocean when his ship was attacked by an unknown animal. The day after, they found a horn lodged in the ship about 1 foot, or 30 centimeters long. In 1620, French General Augustin de Beaulieu saw two dark azure blue porpoise-like animals below South Africa. He said they had horns about 1.5 feet, or 45 centimeters in length. What's weird about this sighting is that he described it having a high fin on the animal's back. Known narwhals don't have fins on their back, only ridges. Beaulieu also discussed a case where a man's ship was actually sunk by one of these animals after it rammed his boat with its horns. Finally, in 1892, several sailors on the Baleena saw a narwhal by the Bransfield Strait, pretty close to the Antarctic mainland. The men on board were experienced whalers who clearly saw the animal's horn, even using the whaler's term for a narwhal, uni. Beaulieu's account seems to resemble a swordfish a bit more than a narwhal. Swordfish have been known to attack ships before. In fact, the Alvin, another ship which saw a sea cryptid, famously had a swordfish get stuck in it. Swordfish are also known to be in the southern hemisphere and have a large fin on their back. The only major detail that lines up more with the narwhal is Beaulieu describing it as porpoise-like. On the other hand, the Baleena account is pretty clear, if brief. The only issue is that the source of the sighting didn't actually see it himself, other crewmen did. The source was also an artist, so him not seeing the narwhal and drawing it is a bummer. In 1983, two Russian scientists proposed that there was a new species of orca or killer whale found near Antarctica. Unfortunately, the specimen they had of the animal was destroyed in a storm. They described it as a killer whale that had a smaller body and a 40% smaller tail, as well as some differences in skull shape. These new whales were also often said to have a yellowish coloring. Unlike most killer whales that fed on larger marine animals, it mostly fed on fish and lived in the pack ice. A 1983 Soviet study of killer whale stomachs found that the diets of yellow killer whales were 98% fish, while white killer whales were 90% mammals like seals. A 2003 paper by Robert Pittman pointed out that the Antarctic killer whale had similarities with the Type C killer whale. Type C killer whales are described as feeding on fish, smaller than usual orcas, and living in pack ice. There is still debate as to whether or not the Antarctic killer whale is both a new species and the same as the Type C killer whale. Another animal seemingly only from the northern hemisphere is the walrus. But in the late 1500s, a Dutch explorer named Jan Huygens van Linschoten may have spotted one or heard of one on the tip of South America. He made a painting titled Natives and Animals of the Strait of Magellan, and in that painting, an animal similar to a walrus is visible. One issue Austin Whittall pointed out is that the tail of the creature doesn't resemble a walrus at all. In fact, he theorized that it was actually a drawing of the Yemish, a giant otter-like cryptid. He thought that the paws of the painting more resembled an otter than a walrus. Whittall also pointed out that it somewhat resembles Odobenocetops, a species that did live in the southern hemisphere until about 5 million years ago. Still another theory was that it was actually a drawing of a living saber-toothed tiger. A commenter on Whittall's blog brings up that South America has many reports of water tigers. These are cryptid big cats with long fangs that frequently hunt in the water. For a more skeptical theory, my friend Hourdark proposed that the painter had found a fossilized saber-toothed tiger skull. The painting was just him trying to reconstruct the animal based on the fossil. Whittall also discussed one version of a creature known as the Traco as a possible walrus. He said it had the legs of a guanaco, an animal related to llamas, a fish tail, the spiky bristles of a sea urchin, and 2 pointed horns. Whittall speculated that the horns described were actually the tusks of a walrus. While the spiky bristles are a detail that definitely lines up with a walrus, as is the fishtail to an extent, I don't think the guanaco legs match up at all. Maybe it was just people filling in the gaps because they didn't get a clear look at the legs, but maybe it's just not a walrus. There were also southern walrus sightings below South Africa and New Zealand. French explorer Francois Legault reported seeing a red sea cow with long tusks south of the Cape of Good Hope. In New Zealand, naturalist James Hector heard about sightings of walruses. He even speculated that they could be found on some Antarctic islands and ice floes someday. In 1809, a ship was traveling near the remote Kerguelen Islands when one of the sailors spotted a large rock. As they approached, the captain of the ship realized that it was a large moving animal. It began to move towards them, forcing the captain to steer the ship away to avoid crashing into it. As they came closer, they prepared to shoot at it, but once they got near, they described the creature as so terrible they chose to sail away instead. They estimated the size of the creature as larger than their ship, which was about 110 feet, or 33.5 meters in length. It was black in color with barnacles or some type of spots on it. The part above water was described as wrinkly, and similar to an umbrella in appearance. The wrinkles seemed to move as the creature moved. The captain thought he saw its head, which he described as some sort of knob, but he wasn't sure. Samuel Mitchell, the man who wrote about this sighting in the Medical Repository Journal, also found encounters of similar animals on the same trade route. In 1794, a Captain Whitlock saw a massive unidentified animal. Like with the Kerguelen Islands monster, he described distinctive spots on it he likened to eyes. Another captain named, I'm not making this up, Con Man, said he saw a large creature with barnacles or some sort of parasite on it. Although he said it was unlike any known species of whale, he didn't rule it being a whale out completely. Mitchell vouched for the character of both of these men and said they were trustworthy. While most of these cryptids are water animals, there is one very odd land cryptid, also from the Kerguelen Islands. In 1840, Captain James Ross would lead an expedition into many different parts of the Southern Ocean. When his crew landed on the Kerguelens, they found small horse tracks. Here's what Captain Ross wrote about the expedition. Of land animals we saw none, and the only traces we could discover of there being any on this island were the singular footsteps of a pony or donkey, found by the party detached for surveying purposes under the command of Lieutenant Bird. They were described by Dr. Robertson as 3 inches or 7.6 centimeters long and 2.5 inches or 6 centimeters wide. They had a small and deep depression on each side and were shaped like a horseshoe. It is by no means improbable that the animal had been cast on shore from some wrecked vessel. They traced its footsteps for some distance in the recently fallen snow, in hopes of getting sight of it, but lost the tracks on reaching a large space of rocky ground which was free from snow. While it's possible that they found a shipwrecked horse, the Kerguelens are extremely remote, being about 3,000 miles or 4,800 kilometers away from the African coast. I even looked into shipwrecks in the area to see if the horse could have come from a known one. Since the track seemed somewhat new, I figured a ship would have had to get wrecked a couple months before they landed. But I didn't find any lost or shipwrecked boats near the Kerguelens around that time. There were other Antarctic expeditions in 1840, but Ross's expedition was the only one in that area. Incredibly, there's an alternate theory that this was actually a massive bird. 3 toes is the theory that there is a giant seafaring bird which has left tracks all over the world. The Kerguelen Islands were one of the places that Ivan Sanderson, who first proposed the giant bird theory, said its tracks were seen. He's not alone, as Bernard Heuvelmans raised the possibility that an ocean-going giant bird existed in his book In the Wake of the Sea Serpents. He brought up an extinct species of bird called Hesperornis that went extinct about 72 million years ago. They were flightless, instead swimming in the ocean with powerful legs. They also reached a height of up to 6.5 feet, or 2 meters. While he didn't theorize that the species still lived, he used it as an example of an unknown bird possibly being responsible for sea serpent sightings. In his archives, he also mentioned some sort of cryptid activity on the Kerguelens in 1995, though it's unknown what this refers to. Dale Drinan suggested that some of the 3 toes tracks could have been made by elephant seals. The Kerguelen Islands are known to have elephant seals, and they can make some pretty strange tracks in the snow. The only issue is that the men on the Ross expedition specifically described them as horse-like. According to Drinan, elephant seals are said to make deceptively bird-like tracks. The Kerguelen Islands have no known native land animals, but mules did end up being temporarily introduced there in the 1940s. Whatever made those tracks in 1840 remains a mystery. The Kerguelen Islands horse wouldn't be the only unknown animal the James Ross expedition saw. The year later, in 1841, Captain Ross and the surgeon on board, Robert McCormick, saw large whales with long fins on the top of their bodies. In 1902, zoologist Edward Wilson saw a group of similar whales on an Antarctic expedition. He described them as black in color with a white chin. The fin was about 3.5 feet or 1 meters in length. In 1964, a cetologist or whale scientist named Robert Clark reported 8 whale sightings near Chile. While most of these sightings were too far away to make out clear details, in 2 of these sightings they saw a small group of whales with high dorsal fins. These fins were mostly black in color with occasional white markings. The whales themselves were also black, with some grayish-white coloring. Some of the whales also had a grayish-white spot that surrounded the base of the fin. They chased after the whales but were unable to get close, though they did snap a picture. Clark even noted that these whales were very similar to the ones described by Edward Wilson. Speaking of unknown cetaceans, in 1824 a single strange dolphin was observed off of the coast of Antarctica. It was cited by naturalists Jean Coy and Joseph Gaimard. They had actually just spotted another new species of dolphin shortly before this one. They described the unknown dolphin as almost all black with a white marking behind its eye. What stood out to me is that the dolphin they had spotted before this, Delphinus cruciger, actually wasn't proven to exist until a specimen was captured in 1847. I wonder how many other species were spotted, but went extinct before proof was found. You might know about the Ninjin, a giant creature spotted by whaling ships in Antarctica. Since the story came from a 2chan creepypasta, it's widely considered a hoax, but it may be based on a real encounter. In 1959, the Japanese whaling ship Soya saw a large unidentified shape in the Lutso-Holm Bay. They initially thought it was some sort of drum jettisoned from another boat, but then it began to move towards them. The head was about 80 centimeters or 3 feet long, and was a cross between the top part of a monkey's head and a cow's head. It was covered in long brown hair, and had noticeably large eyes and pointed ears. One man claimed to see a saw-like fin on the creature's back. It was visible for about 30 seconds, before it disappeared into the water. One man tried to take a photo, but was unable to grab the camera from inside the ship in time. The Soya had a biologist on board named Dr. Yoshi, but there's conflicting stories as to whether or not he actually saw the creature. Either way, he couldn't match the description with any known animals. The captain, who was a fan of Godzilla movies, nicknamed the animal Antarctic Godzilla. The only skeptical explanation I've seen is that the sailors were exhausted by rough sailing conditions and experienced a mass hallucination. Whatever Antarctic Godzilla was, the creature hasn't been seen since. Huge shout out to my Patreons Timothy, Wild World, John R., Johnny Tsunami, Jason Cook, and Lenarts. Also a big shout out to Lexapro, Robin, and Pondicherry. If you'd like to support me, a link to my Patreon will be below. If you'd like to see more cryptid videos, including one where I talk about the mysterious sound from Antarctica known as the bloop, a playlist of them will also be in the description. If you'd like to see more cryptid artwork, I'll also have a link to over a dozen cryptid artists in the description too. That includes Brock Moss's project Paper Whales, which draws various cryptid whales and dolphins, and Tim Morris's Demons of the Deep, which draws various ocean cryptids. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.